Have you heard of TUnit? According to our friend Nick, is the next big thing in testing. So I'm curious to see if I agree with him, and I want to give it a try. But this time, I will record it. So in this video, you will see my first attempt to use TUnit. Let's do it. So, before we start, the only thing that I know about TUnit is that it is a testing framework, kind of like XUnit or NUnit or MES test. And that's the reason why I'm excited to play with it, because it's something that I didn't foresee something coming to change the landscape. I thought that, okay, we have settled down with those three options. Eventually, they might have new features, but I was not expecting a new testing framework. That's why I'm extremely curious about it. And I need to say that I never installed it. I never went to the documentation. So every single thing that you will see after this moment, it will be based on my first experience. So if I have something that doesn't work that well, you will see the frustration. You will see my first-hand opinions on the things that I'm seeing. Maybe I might do a lot of mistakes because I don't know the libraries, and all of that will be a reflection on how good it is, at least at the moment. And we'll try to discover how it works. And how will I do it? I will do it by trying to practice test-driven development with an example that I've been doing a lot of times when I want to demo test-driven development. And you can find a video about it right here somewhere. I think it's on that site. And that way, I hope that I have a better understanding by the end of what TUnit is and how powerful it is or not, if I agree with Nick or not. And maybe you can discover some things as well about this library. So let's start. What do I have here? Just a simple solution without anything. First thing that I do when I'm practicing test-driven development is to create my testing project. So when I create a new project on my IDE, I have the option to pick a unit testing project, but I don't expect to see TUnit here. So it's not. An option yet. And I understand that, right? Eventually, it might be here one day. Since it's not here, what we can do is to create a console application, I think, but maybe the best thing to do is to go to the documentation and find it. Here we are, and this is the docs for the TUnit repository. And we have here the 5-minute tutorial, so maybe here we'll find what we are looking for. Okay, installing TUnit. Yeah, create a console application. To that project, have the TUnit package. So that's the thing. So we can either copy this or with our IDE do it through there. So since we have this open on Rider, let's do it there. Okay, so let's have the Roman numerals kata as I used to do. And let's create a test project. Create. Okay, here it is. So let's install the package that the documentation mentions, search for TUnit and install it. Once it's done, if we go into our CS project, here it is. Go back to the documentation. Yeah, it's exactly what it's mentioned there. Okay, it says to not use the .NET Test SDK. Okay, so looks fine. So next, since I have my project in place, what I will do first is to create a first failing test. So let's see how to write our first test to see how we do it. Okay, it mentions create the test class, same idea. Now we have a test attribute. That is something that you have seen on MES test, I think. I think in MES test is the way that you do it. I confess that I like it. Often explaining the difference between a fact and a theory on XUnit is not that easy. So being clear that this is a test, I think I like that. Let's copy this. This looks like the boilerplate of our class. Go back to our project. Let's throw away the program. Okay. I don't know if I should throw away the program CS or not. I assume that I need to do it, but I will not do it now. And now let me create my convert scenarios. So it's the Roman numerals converting the scenarios for the conversion. Okay. And based on the thing that I copied, what I know that I need is a method like this, and this will be my test. Okay, so the code would be something like, it's quite interesting, this idea that needs to be asynchronous. Does it need to be asynchronous? Okay, look into the documentation. It looks so. So we'll get back to that later. Let's keep it that way. So the first scenario is if I call a method that I think I will name it convert, and the convert can be part of a class named something like var converter is equal to new Roman numeral converter. So the numeral that will come out of that, okay, I would say should be 1 because I usually use fluent assertions, but let's go to the documentation to see how it is the assertion library for it. Okay, so, oh, interesting. We need to await the assert part. Let's do it. So, okay, here we go, but let's do one thing. Let's add a to-do here. Can I use fluent assertions? I prefer the notation of result should be something, then this assert that's something, you get it. Okay. The numeral should, okay, now it basically doesn't know what the hell is the type of this thing. And I know it should be in high. So first step of TDD, let's run the tests, even if the compilation fails, because we want to be used to see the test failing. Okay, doesn't compile, so let's generate some code. Create the type, create the method. It says that the method returns an action, but what I want to return is a string. The input will be a number. Okay, and now the assert that numeral is equal to why does it still believe that this thing is an action when it's not? Okay, I think the code was still compiling because if we notice this thing here, one user, and we go into there, we can see that the code is source generated. That's one of the advantages of TUnit. So it will source generate the code to run the tests, so it doesn't need to do reflection or discovery of the tests, and they become faster to run, what makes a lot of sense now that we have code generation. But eventually, on that moment, it took a few seconds more, and it was strange for me as developer. Maybe because of the fact that I'm practicing TDD, and I was in a failing stage. Not sure, but yeah, it might be the reason. Okay, so assert that is equal to y. So it looks like that the assertion library is always using a task. So that's why we need that async there. I wonder why. Okay, I know that often we need to do tests that will await something, but for someone that writes a lot of domain knowledge tests, and most of your tests are on that part, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We'll get back to that later. Okay, so we have our first failing test. So if we run the tests, nothing happens. And so I heard about that, but let's go to the documentation to find the reason. Okay, I believe that if we keep going through this guide, okay, we have here, okay, run the tests. So let's simply do the dotnet test thing. So, okay, on rider, shift, terminal. Here we can do the dotnet test, but it didn't spot any test, and I'm pretty sure that the tag is there. Close the testing window. Okay, the test attribute is here. So let's try to run it with the release flag. Okay, maybe it's because we still have the main thing there. So let's throw it away and let's run the tests again. Okay, now it's spotting that we have one test, and that test is failing as it's expected. I wonder if I skip the thing that mentions that the program CS should be removed, because when you do the .NET new console, I think he always creates the program CS. I think I'm right. So let's go to the documentation and, okay, installing the project. Oh, that's what happens when you don't read the documentation. And then remove any automatically generated program CS or method or something like that. Okay. So that was my fault. Yeah. Maybe if this thing was in bold, I wouldn't miss it, but yeah, my fault. Okay, so when you do the .NET test run, it will pick the tests. But when we run them on our IDE, it will not. There's a reason for that I was aware of it, so it's not a big deal to me. And I saw a page on the documentation when we were glancing through the options on the quick start that should talk about that. Let's take a look. Okay, so running our tests, .NET run, .NET test, .NET exec, blah, blah, blah. And okay, IDE support. There's this thing of use the testing platform server mode. So historically, the testing frameworks have been built on top of the foundations for MES test, I think. I don't know the details, but I know that it's kind of like a retrocompatibility thing. And in fact, the most recent versions can use this testing platform support. Okay, so it used to be this VS test adapter. So it was kind of like when we were running the test, it will have an adapter for VS test, and that way it will run the tests. The thing is that often it's not enabled by default on your IDE, but yeah, it's supported on Visual Studio, at least as a preview thing. On Rider is supported, and on VS Code with DevKit extension, you can do it as well. So on Rider, I will look for VS Test. Okay. You can see right here that I don't have that option enabled. So let's quickly do that, enable it. Once we click on the enable, we need to go here and also add something to specify the mask that should be applied to find the tests. So if we go to the documentation, it's this star tests star. So star tests star. Save it. Okay, let's try run our tests. It's quite interesting that it still doesn't find any test. I wonder that if I go here, maybe it's my bad. Let me try something. Star, test star, save it. Okay. Now let's try it again. Okay, I was thinking that maybe it was because of the fact that I didn't name it tests, but test. Do you know what? Let me try to restart Rider. Okay, so I not only restart it, I open the different version of Rider since I usually use the early access program version. That is the latest bits. It might be a problem there. So let's try here. So let's do the same thing. VS test, enable the testing platform, save it. Okay, let's try to run the tests, and it still can't find anything. That's annoying. So let's go back to the documentation and try to find what we are missing from the beginning. Yeah, we created a console application. We added the TUnit. We didn't add the pre-release. Might be the pre-release, I don't know. Then we remove any automatic programs. Yes, we have done that. We write the tests. Yes, Pro should be like this. Yes, it is like this. So we are not using the .NET Test SDK because we created the .NET SDK. It's a console application. We are using .NET 8. Our first test as the test, are we using the TUnit.core? Are you from TUnit? Yes, TUnit.core, but let's be explicit, using TUnit.core. But yeah, we don't need it. Should be a global using, maybe. Let's try it. No, same thing. Let's try the pre-release version of the package. Manage NuGet packages, pre-releases. Okay. There's no pre-release on TUnit currently. This one is the most recent, so that's not the problem. Okay, so we have the test, our test class in the namespace. When we go to running the tests, TUnit is built on top of the testing platform. That's okay for me. We can run it. We can test it this way. If we open the terminal, we can see that it will kick in TUnit. I can also see that it doesn't know this report TX and the coverage, but that should not be the problem. And on Rider, we have the enable testing platform. on that place, it's enabled. We just try to disable the VS test, run the tests, but it still doesn't pick the test. So I don't see an obvious solution. So yeah, we need to debug. And the best way to do it is, let's go to GitHub, we zoom in, issues, ID, test discovery, not working, JetBrains Rider, macOS plus Linux. I am using JetBrains Rider and macOS. Okay, so what is saying? Create the solution with this test case, run the test it goes through, enable the testing platform, exactly our situation. Okay, there's an issue on U-track for that is in the state of fixed. But 14 days ago, 12 days ago, 4 days ago, it's still broken. So let's go back into the issue. Okay, they are talking about Nick. Okay, they say that, yeah, JetBrains says it's fixed. It should be on the 2024.3 public build. Let me confirm my version. Okay, I have used the 2024.3, the EAP version, and it's not there. Okay, I've tested with EAP, but not lucky. Yeah, let's go to the final ones. Okay, this isn't in the standard release yet. Bad news, it's a problem with JetBrains Rider and the test discovery thing. Awesome. So how will we do this? We'll continue using it, but using the command line. That's not a problem with that. So this is one of the first problems that I see, especially nowadays, that there's a lot of attention on this package with people like Nick talking about it. It was quite famous for a recent open source project. So it's unfortunate that some of us might have a poor experience. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going. In our case, what we'll do is that I will have the terminal here, and I will keep running the .NET test. Okay, I have a failing test as it's supposed. And our test that is failing is the should return I when 1, and it says that the method or operation is not implemented because I have an exception being thrown there. So what we do to take this test to green, we return hi. Cool. So we run the tests. Not this way, we run the tests in the manual way. So .NET test once again. Okay, our test is successful. So let's keep moving on. So the next thing that I would do is to bring a test for the scenario where, for example, when I provide 2, I should get 2 highs. So the way that I would do it on XUnit, how I used to do it, is by using a theory with test data. So I wonder how we do that on TUnit. So let's go to the documentation. TUnit data-driven tests looks like what we are looking for. Okay, we have arguments. Perfect naming, in my opinion. So let's go here and bring an argument, the number and the expected string. Okay, I will run the test again. Okay, it succeeded. So I'll bring a new test case. We run the tests. Failed. Expected. Because we were expecting the 2, but we found the 1 I. How do we fix it in the TDD way? It can be something like, if number is 2, return double I. So let's run the tests again. They go green. So we go back here, and now let's bring another test case, like the 3. Now let's be smart about this. So, and the way that I think that I will do it is with the 4, where we'll add to a Roman number that will return, and that Roman will start as an empty thing, and we go through the list and we return it. So we are in the green state again. Now that I'm in the green state, one thing that I can do is refactoring. And we can refactor not only code, but also tests. And I think I want to refactor something here. I don't want this thing being created inside of this test to improve the way that I'm reading the code. So if I was using something like XUnit, I would push this into the constructor. I will use that as the setup of my test. And in XUnit is the constructor. If we are talking about an unit, you would use an attribute for that, the setup for that. So let's see what options do we have with TUnit. Okay, so let's go back to the documentation. And yes, we have here the option of injectable class data source. Is this the thing that we're looking for? Okay, initialization and teardown. This looks like the perfect candidate for something like integration testing. It's not exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so here, test setup. Okay, is this thing that I'm looking for. Most setups for a test can be performed in a constructor, so the same way as XUnit. However, some scenarios require further setup and could be an asynchronous operation. Okay, oh, this is interesting. We can have a before each test, before class, only once before any test in the class, before assembly. That's cool. Global before. So interesting. It will fire before every test, class, or assembly. It's kind of like all of those combined. And the way that the code is here, okay, I can say things like before each test, let's do something. It's not what I'm looking for, but this is a cool feature. So since I'm here, let me just take a look into the test cleanups. Okay, so it's basically the dispose. You can do it with the iDispose and also with attributes like that. I like that. But for our case, what we need is to get this out of here and take it to the constructor. That is one thing that I really like on XUnit, the fact that I can use the default way of doing things in the class for the sake of the test lifecycle. So let's create the field, and now our tests just need to call this field. If we run our tests, they still go through. So now I want to do one more refactoring that is regarding this fluent assertions thing. So I wonder if I can use fluent assertions. So let's try it. Let's install a package, installing. Okay, and now instead of doing this, the numeral should be the expected one. And that way I don't have this. That means that the test is no longer an asynchronous and it's void. Will this work or not? Let's run the test. It works. Good news. I just wonder if there's any advantage of using the other approach. So let's go to the documentation. Okay, assertions. Okay, tutorial on assertions. Awaiting. The unit will await your assertions and serves two purposes. The await keyword is responsible for performing the assertion. Before you call await, we are building a chain of assertion rules. It allows executing and asserting on async delegates without performing sync over async. Okay, so I think from what I get here is that using the default testing library the default assertion library on TUnit, we will always do tests in this way with an asynchronous task. But I guess you can still use other libraries for that if you need. What is cool, because I think I'm not ready to leave fluent assertions, and maybe I think it would be interesting if this project had the same experience as fluent assertions or bringing fluent assertions as part of it. I'm not sure if that would make sense or not, but it could be cool. But from the documentation, I can see a few interesting things. Like assertion scopes is one of those features that I really love on XUnit, and most people don't know it. It's the idea of having all the assertions executing at once without having that experience when the first fail, you don't run the second one. And looks like they also have extensibility. That is something that is pretty cool on Fluent Assertions as well. So I think that most of the ideas are here, but the natural language is not the way of expressing the assertions. What's a shame. So if we go to the extensions, it doesn't mention Fluent Assertions. So I guess it's something that is not there. So let's go into the repo and just out of curiosity, search for Fluent Assertions. Please support Fluent Assertions. Yeah. You have a very testing library here, but please use Fluent Assertions. You can bring Fluent Assertions yourself as a dependency if you need to, and the reason why I think you can't. Okay, cool. So yeah, you can use it yourself. That's a good one. Okay, so this one is done. So when you think about unit testing, I would say that 90% of the things that you usually need is how to write a test with arguments, that is this thing, so the inline data in XUnit, how to do the setup and the tear down. We have seen that as well. And how to do assertions. So with that, you cover 95% of the cases. Sometimes there's some edge cases that you might take advantage of some features, but usually you don't need them. With just this few set of features, you can do most of the things. But before we close here, let's do one thing. Let's go into the documentation and see if there's any other feature that looks interesting. Okay, there's one here that made me curious. That is this idea of matrix test. Okay, this is cool. This is generating different permutations of the tests. So it will generate tests based on the matrix data. So having multiple combinations, like, yeah, if you have something like a calculator, this can be quite cool, I think. So this is an interesting idea. I like this thing of the befores and the afters. That's cool. You can have a retry policy on a test. Do you know those things that they feel like a good idea, but at the same time, you don't want it? Is what I'm feeling with this one. Because I'm afraid that this will be a tool to avoid addressing problems. Because a lot of times, those types of flaky tests, we do this retry manually, right? So we go there and retry them. Sometimes they will go through after 2 or 3 times, but ideally we should address the root cause. But I get this. I think this will be extremely useful, maybe on a kind of like an integration test with something that you can't run on your machine. Imagine that you can't deploy a cloud resource into your machine to run the test, so you need to get in touch with it to check if things are going well. So it might be flaky, and instead of defining a huge time span to wait for the test run, maybe having a retry policy can be a good idea. I like this idea, but be careful with it, is what I feel. And I really like the fact that you can define this attribute yourself. Yeah, this is awesome. This is a great idea. It's like having poly inside of your tests. Makes a lot of sense. Repeating. This one, I don't see a good reason to use it, to be honest. This is one really good idea, I think. I had a lot of tests in the past in things like integration or functional tests where we want to define a boundary for that test to run. Otherwise, it will be there forever. And this is a quite expressive way to do it with this timeout. I like this thing, to be honest. There's anything else here that seems interesting? Okay, not in parallel. So, by default, TUnit will run in parallel. What is great is how unit tests should run. But there's one way to define that a test should not run in parallel, and is as simple as an attribute. That makes a lot of sense. Depends on, it's one of those cases, isn't it? So you can define that a test depends on another one. So if only if the first one executes successfully, it will run the next one? Or, okay, unless the previous one finish, we don't run the next one. This will be great to avoid some problems, but usually those problems are problems of test design, like setting up the data or restarting the data. This means that we can define a sequence of the tests running. I'm not a huge fan unless we are talking about something like end-to-end tests. In end-to-end tests, I think I would like this. For example, having a first test that is login. Okay, login is okay. Let's go to the next one. Set up the definitions of the user. Next one, create a task. Next one, complete the task. All of those individual things can be a test, and we can run them in sequence. So for that use case, this can be pretty cool, I think. But be careful with it. It's one of those things that can quickly backfire and become a problem. It's a code smell. So we can define order in tests. Yeah, cool. The first glance is this seems pretty awesome. Yeah, I have to confess I'm excited about this. We struggled during this video with that thing with the testing runner on Rider, but this is what happens when you are doing something that no one else is doing. Maybe that feature was there, but almost no one is using it because we are all using XUnit, MES test, and unit, and this is conquering new territory. So that seems quite cool. I love the idea of having the tests being source generated. That's awesome. And I have seen here some great ideas applied, and I have to confess that I'm impressed with the amount of features that some of them, I know them from XUnit as an advanced thing, and a lot of them are here out of the box in the distance of a single attribute. What seems like a lot of work from who's working on this thing. So by the way, let's quickly look into GitHub and TUnit. You can see 2.2k stars, what is great. Let me leave my star there. And you can sponsor the project. Tom is doing an amazing work. I don't know him, but well done, sir. 17 contributors. So it looks like a promising project. And for something so recent, I have to confess that I'm impressed. I like what I've seen. I like the fact that there's source generation here. It can be a problem if there's that first experience that I encountered with a bit of a time to generate the code. So I had a compilation error that didn't make sense to me. But it could be my machine on that moment. And once we know it, okay, it's fine. And besides that, I love the fact that there are some features here that for those types of tests, kind of like integration tests or end-to-end tests, they can be extremely useful, like the retry thing or the timeout thing, the dependency as well. So I would not recommend them to the typical unit testing thing that I've been doing here, but for those cases, I think it will be awesome. So I'm excited about this, I have to confess, and I think that I need to start building things with it to see where we can take this thing, to see how powerful it is. But one thing that I'm curious now is about doing integration testing with it. And by the way, if it's something that you would like to see, just let me know in the comments and I will make sure that I record the video on it. So I think I will have new videos about this, and if you want to see them, make sure to subscribe to be notified. But so far, I think I agree with Nick. This can be the future, to be honest. Let's see where this goes. And in the meanwhile, if you want to see a comparison between the other three testing frameworks, the MES test, NUnit, and XUnit, I have a video for you, is this one right here, where I will go through those three testing frameworks and explain the differences and try to explain the reason why most of us use XUnit.